While the Federation tried to smile and say the world was fine, war was inevitable. The Federation was on a constant conquest, and they were bound to hit a wall somewhere. But no one could guess that that wall would be one mercenary group. Hell, one man. Project Wingman is a game that makes absolutely no sense. It has a story akin to a fanfic writer's retelling of World War II while under the influence of several drugs. It takes place in a world where the UN not only survived an apocalypse, but now actually dominates most of the world. Planes are able to carry several hundred missiles, while G-Force also just doesn't exist. But despite all this nonsense, it is an absolute beauty. It looks visually stunning. The music seems to be created by the gods, but instead it's by a single Frenchman. It manages to make me patriotic for a country that doesn't even exist, and given me a special disdain for the color orange. It is nonsensical crazy, but it's also just fun. Despite mainly being made by two people, it has the feel of a full AAA game. And all of this coming from just a playing game. This is Project Wingman. Who Sicario is seen as in the history books varies from place to place. Some say they were heroes, some villains, and others just mercs. Only those that flew with Sicario could give me the best picture of what happened, but sadly, there aren't many of those left. I've searched far and wide and think I've been able to frame a picture of what's truly happened. I'll try to give an unbiased opinion as much as I can throughout this documentary, despite both the Federation and Cascadia's sometimes questionable actions throughout the war. Project Wingman takes place in a world where Twitter was created, and also Yellowstone exploded. This threw the world into a calamity, and hundreds of years later, the surprisingly still alive Queen of England decided to reform the UN under her own image. Several other nations were also founded, but one of the most important ones being Cascadia. Cascadia being right next to the explosion of Yellowstone is the most abundant resources of Cordia, a new resource the Calamity created that gives you abundant energy, used for energy. Now, the Federation, going back to its British roots, is trying to invade and conquer Cascadia for its abundant resources of this gamer juice. You are Monarch, a pilot in the Sicario mercenary group, a mercenary group with strong air combat capabilities. You are the leader of Hitman team with 2 wingmen, Hitman 2, Diplomat, and Hitman 3, Comic. You also have your AWAC Galaxy, and your WSO Prez. And then you also have Kaiser, who's daddy material. And when you start the game gives you no real tutorial. It throws you straight into the first mission and expects you to get good, because if you don't, you're going to die. So after giving the mission to bomb some people or something, and having a delightful conversation with some mercenaries whose employers you literally just blew up, you learn of a civil war happening in Cascadia, and seeing the opportunity to insert yourself for more money, to prove yourself and help a country in desperate need to gain its freedom, you throw yourself into the war. And after peacefully crossing the border and calmly evicting the Federation from an airbase, we throw ourselves into the thick of it to rescue a ground unit from a heated battle. It's time for war. While sifting through files of earlier battles in the war, I noticed a mention of a mercenary group by name. I brushed this off at first since Cascadia had been known to hire Mercs for the war, but it piqued my interest again when I saw them mentioned during the fall of Presidia, once more by name. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be there that day. Planes falling from the sky, firefights in the streets. Heard the city was beautiful during the sunset. This episode of Project Wingman, we get to bomb our own resources, because if we can't have them, no one can. Now, while I do love this game and all, I am going to complain a little bit. Visually, this level slaps. The music slaps. The story slaps. But this level kind of sucks. This level has a lot of ground targets, but you can't go oops all M-lags because there's also quite a few air targets. So, if you don't bring some multi-lock anti-air missiles, you're going to be constantly dodging missiles every 5 seconds or spending half an hour striking every plane from the sky. Now, you could go then a mix of multi-lock air and a multi-lock ground, but then you're also going to take forever to destroy ground targets. It is kind of frustrating because then if you end up dying, you get to do it all over again. And it sucks because this level has a unique mechanic where you have to bomb these extractors, and either you shoot a ground missile at a unique angle and it will hit it, or you have to fly close by and hit it with a standard missile. Which is really interesting at all, it's just really hard to line up these shots when you have 7 pursuing aircraft. But once we spend a year popping every Cordium tank because explosion funny, we take to the sea. Cause you see, there be this ship called the Eminent Domain. There is this ship in the ocean called the Eminent Domain. It used to be a Federation battleship, but was taken over by Cascadian Coast Guard. And now they must need your help to defend it from every missile possible. So, both Monarch and Comic fly out to the ocean, shooting down both plane and ship, till you get to meet the beautiful captain. And now you must go in, shooting down every plane, anti-air, SAM, and cannons. And what is that pretty light? Hitman 3 call sign Comic. Real name Evelyn London. A member of the Cascadian Air Academy and eventually promoted to Major. Around AC 412 to AC 442 while in the Air Force, she came in contact with Jay Griffiths, call sign Stardust, and Peter Kennedy, Hitman 2. She was dishonorably discharged after failing to call off an airstrike at a pirate base, killing off an informant. She left the country thereafter, drowning her sorrows until she was hired by the Sicario mercenary group. She has a very no-nonsense attitude during engagements, but the logs show her having a more daredevil attitude nearing the end of the war. Hitman 2, call sign Diplomat, real name Peter Kennedy. A man born into a rich and privileged family, and after meeting in the middle with his family for a career choice, he enrolled in the Federation Air Academy. He had less than average grades and was later expelled. He then flew with smaller air forces and eventually joined Sicario. He was then given a better deal within Sicario after Arnold Franken, its leader, saw potential in him. Peter has a very quippy and carefree attitude, but easily crumbles under intense situations, becoming very brash. Despite being a mercenary, he has a disdain for just senseless violence just for money, and he looks down on other mercenaries who kill anything and anyone just for a profit. Hitman 1's WSO, call sign President, real name Robin Kuo. Little is known about her before she joined Sicario, but Robin is famous for being the only WSO to be able to withstand flights with Hitman 1's pilot, Monarch. Sicario AWAC, call sign Galaxy, real name Dominic Zaitsev. It is strange to see a mercenary group with a dedicated AWAC, especially one with no prior military training. Dominic started as a radio engineer and started a radio show that was eventually shut down due to secret gambling activities. Dominic fled the Pacific Federation afterwards and spent the next couple years bumbling through life. He eventually got a binding contract making him the second in command in Sicario. Dominic is very fiery, loud, outspoken, and carefree, much of which is reminiscent of his time as a radio operator. The Federation has been able to keep the invasion of the second largest country in the world a secret through Twitter hashtags, TikTok propaganda, and a communications array. This communications array has been disrupting communications all throughout Cascadia. Again and again, you will hear Galaxy and others complain of it because it makes it harder for them to communicate over long distance and coordinate attacks. So now, it's time for us to do something about it. First, we satiate our bloodlust by destroying air defenses in the dead of night and bombing unsuspecting pilots before they even get off the ground. There are 3 levels in Project Wingman. There are 3 levels I consider to be the peak of Project Wingman, and Mission 10 is the first. This is the first mission in all of the war where all the power of Sicario is deployed on one operation. You have every ground unit and every pilot unleashing everything to take this base. This level hits all the keynotes in what makes a great Project Wingman level. The visuals showcase the absolute scale of this battle. The number of planes and ground units you have to fight gives you a sense of how important this specific battle is. And then the dialogue. God, how can a plane game have such good dialogue? While the story overall could be considered goofy and nonsensical, the writing for each specific level is really great. It gives you a good sense of the current situation, from the ground units you are currently flying over to the enemy units you are currently engaging in battle. The writing for each character is really, really good. And this game has really good characters. The dialogue of each mission can really give you an insight on either the current fight or the war as a whole. The writing for each unique level really does give this whole war a sense of scale, and makes it feel like it's not just your battles that are happening, but there is an actual war with a world superpower currently going on. And now we have to bomb a concerning number of tanks and to take refuge in this airbase, where we will get to permanently stay due to current squatting laws, which make any action taken against us to remove us from this premises a war crime. Both sides at the start of the war assumed this to just be a simple fight. The Federation expected it to be a simple invasion no longer than a couple of weeks, and Cascadia just expected it to be a quick ejection of Federation forces. So when the war started to escalate and Cascadia started hiring mercenaries, the Federation threw all they had to push Cascadia back. If they hit hard and quick enough, they should be able to get a surrender from Cascadia before they could fully deploy the Mercs. So, it was a surprise to everyone when Cascadia not only didn't back down, but started pushing the Federation back. The fall of the communications array was one of the first major blows to the Federation. Now, all the public knew of the war, and the Cascadian forces had cleared all their communications. It was only a matter of time before Cascadia launched a full-force assault back on the Federation. And the second, and probably strongest blow to the Federation was over the Bering Strait. I made a whole video on this level before, but that video is stinky doo-doo, so let me try again. Cold War is the best video game level ever made.
Hey yo, so there's like these Federation transport planes that we really hate. So, like, we went to go blow them up, but they sent more planes to blow us up. So, we sent more planes to blow them up.
And you get the idea. The biggest furball in history. The entirety of each country's air force fighting over the coast of Alaska. This level fades in and you see the sheer chaos. The music, the visuals, the dialogue. I mentioned how the writing was really well done, but the voice actors are what bring it to life. You see a whole range of reactions from this current situation. People panicking to others having a hell of a time. Some of my favorite voice lines are from this level in particular. You get to see everyone's true character here. Comic being determined and putting all of her skill on the line. Kaiser clearly enjoying the fight, knowing the historical significance. And Diplomat being 2 Gs from just shitting himself. The game recognizes the absolute chaos and absurdity of the situation, and it runs with it. It also recognizes your skill. This game doesn't try to shy away that you are good. It lets you know it. And it lets you know it especially well with the music.
What?
Showdown perfectly complements this level. It fits perfectly with the pure dopamine of the situation. I am not a musician, so I can't really go into much detail, and I don't want to try to explain the niche simplicities of the song or the tiny details that make it so good in case I over-explain myself or I'm just utterly wrong because I'm speaking out of my ass. But if you say you do not like this song or this song is bad, I am rapidly approaching. And to cap it all off, look who finally decides to show up. You ran from them back when you were popping cordium tanks, but this time, everything's on the line. Whoever stands down now is going to be in the back end for the rest of the war. So, you put on your big boy boots, ignore all laws of physics, and take on Crimson 1. This battle mostly consists of you tailing a plane, shooting 2 missiles, watching the plane pull a 180, and rinse and repeat. But hey, you're high off the fumes of the 20 plus pilots you just shot down and families you have either made motherless or fatherless, so it's time to show who is the better pilot. And after you shoot down enough of Crimson Team, Crimson 1, the leader of Crimson Team, has a little hissy fit and fucks off. Cascadia was not the only one to use mercenaries and private companies during the war. Icarus armies had been an extension of the Pacific Federation for the longest time. It had a reputation for having mad scientists and developing crazy technologies. One of their greatest inventions was the SP-34R, an insanely fast plane that, despite having no missiles, could directly fire a rail cannon. It was piloted by another skilled mercenary going by the tack name Frost. The files for this battle were among the hardest for me to acquire. All the records had basically been swept under the rug. I could only assume this to be because Hitman Team was the only force deployed. With the Federation in retreat, it's time we take the fight outside of Cascadia. The Federation has a huge fleet of airships in Hawaii, but big. It's up to us to do what we do best: excessive violence. Now, a small warning for this next level: if you like trees, turn away now. Because the Federation, as a part of their retreat back to Prospero, have been scorching the forests behind them. And we are going to solve this issue by using more explosives. Now, in this level in particular, you start to see a shift in tone. Over and over now, we have been handing the Federation's asses to them. We beat their best peacekeeping squad, destroyed the biggest airship fleet they had, and are slowly closing in on reclaiming Presidia. By all means, the Federation is losing this war, and it's surprised they have not surrendered or have asked for a compromise yet. And everyone knows this. You start hearing it in the voices of Hitman Team and other pilots. diplomats start sounding exhausted with the continuous violence we've had to do. And it's not only in your teammates and other allied pilots you hear it, but you start hearing it through the Federation soldiers as well. Many of them are tired, they want to go home, they want nothing else to do with this war. This is all the more prevalent in the battle over Prospero. Being one of the most prosperous trade cities in all of the world, it is a hotspot for both Cascadia and the Federation. This fight, unlike most other fights in this game, has an unsettling tone to it. There is no major glory or high energy when fighting over the city, just two sides who are both exhausted and wanting to have nothing else to do with the war. So, the Federation with their backs backed into a corner, try one last Hail Mary.
6. Authenticate. Blaze. Lean back. Yes. We got it, Percy. Holy shit! Thermal signature rising. That is a galaxy. This is AWACS Galaxy to Alcon. I repeat, this is AWACS Galaxy to Alcon. Alcon. We have incoming ordnance. Cruise missile type. Thermal signatures are off the charts. Hunker in a place or get out of the area. All fighters, I'm sending IFF info. Intercept as many as you can. How many? Too many. We finally get us out of here now.
Prospero really lived up to its name. Being one of the strongest trading cities in the whole world, both sides were eager to be in control. Though, it looks like Cascadia more wanted it because it brought them closer to Presidia. At this point, both sides were exhausted. Sicario had really turned the war in Cascadia's favor, and had the Federation backed into a corner, though no one could have predicted what they would do next. Logs show infighting and the staff arguing with each other, knowing the consequences of what would happen. But the code was called anyway. It's impossible to imagine what they would have felt, watching as missiles head towards them, nothing they could do but run. This had to be the easiest part for me to find, because no amount of censorship or false information could hide you reopening the fucking Earth. Whether it be luck, skill, or the will of God, somehow Hitman Team survived. You couldn't exactly say the same for Prospero. A lot of people say Hitman Team and the rest of Sicario died here. Whether they wanted to hide the truth of Sicario, or just can't imagine a couple of pilots surviving this. And from here, facts get fuzzier and fuzzier. Cascadia kept fewer records after the bombing, and the Federation took advantage of this to muddle their records. The Federation records from this point forward never mentioned Sicario, and to the common observer, it would seem they had just died here, a mercenary group that just fought in the war. But my personal investigations prove that they were so much more. Now, I'll give credit to the French for a couple of things. The birthing of Jose Pavil, croissants being an international punching bag for being French, but not for the creation of Clara Rask, tack name Frost. The first time you met Frost from the hit game Rainbow Six the anime, she was flying a spear over the ocean. Now this time, it is over your scorched airbase, while you pray anybody survived. Frost fights you with her super simps, and throughout this fight, she taunts you. Being a mercenary herself, she questions your loyalty, your motives. Why did you come to fight for Cascadia? This whole game, people have brushed you off as just a merc. But this fight with Frost puts that on the spotlight. What are you going to do now that your employer has been, well, nuked is an understatement. It really focuses on this part of the game that has only mainly been mentioned on the sidelines. The morals and standards of mercs. What do you do when things go belly up during an operation? But while she goes on and on about this stuff about morals and such, I'm too busy trying to eliminate her cause French. After defeating the woman, we have a conversation with Stardust as he begs us to stay in this war. But being pretty convinced that we're absolutely fucked, he convinces us to stay with a very powerful MacGuffin. So powerful, apparently, that in a later level, Prez mentions that she doesn't think anybody should have it. So, what is this MacGuffin? FBI, open up! We have seen many a ship from this game. Small ship, big ship, airship, and now land ship. You ever wanted to know what dopamine feels like? And after we head back to Prospero, because we ain't letting nukes stop us from taking this city, we fly over the active volcano. And during this operation, we run into Crimson Team. Now this is the third time we have run into Crimson Team. And both sides are very obviously tired of this. We beat their ass over Alaska, and they have come back for a round 2. And here we really get to see Crimson 1. Crimson 1 makes no sense. He comes from Cascadia, but is painfully loyal to the Federation. He is a villain that doesn't do this for power, money, or fame, or even to just win the war. He singles you out specifically, and is so eager-driven to prove his superiority as a pilot that he will throw everything he has at you. This man is so butthurt that you beat him. He will fight you, and I repeat, over an active volcano. While fighting Crimson One, he preaches and talks about stuff. And while the fight with Frost made you question your loyalties and your responsibilities as a merc, Crimson One's just annoying. So much that Diplomat just shuts off his radio during a crucial mission. Please sit down. Are you comfortable? Can I get you anything?
You got any whiskey?
Water's fine.
Now, to start this, what was your role in the war?
Federation pilot.
Cascadian pilot.
Sailor on the eminent domain.
Hitman team rescued you from the Federation Navy, correct?
Surprisingly, yeah. Amazing what just 2 planes could do.
Bastards, let the Cascadians keep the battleship.
How many times were you in an active engagement with Hitman team?
4 engagements: Operation Seafarer, Blackout, Free Agent, and Blue Shelter. The loss of that one took out my leg. Could be considered a blessing, knowing how their last engagement turned out.
Only a couple times. First was over that Bering Strait. Their king was really just a blur in the sky.
What do you know of Hitman team's king, Monarch?
Monarch? People called him the Silent Devil.
His tack name was Monarch? That's a pretty egotistical name.
I know that he's either the second coming of Christ or he comes from a long line of madmen.
Outside of Hitman 1, have you had any other interaction with the other Hitman pilots?
Not really the pilots, but their AWAC is really a money man. Would do almost anything for just a couple bucks.
We are in the end game now. After taking back Prospero, the next stop is Presidia, the capital of Cascadia. Though, Presidia is a coastal country, which means it has a very strong naval defense. So, with the power of the eminent domain on our back, we take on most of the Federation's naval force. The next stop is to take Presidia. All the battles, all the lives lost, everything leading up to this. Mission 11 would determine who would have the strongest aerial power for the rest of the war. And the Federation tried to push back from this loss by... But they couldn't keep Cascadia down. And now this battle will determine who wins the war. The Federation has had control of Presidia since the start of this war, and if they were to lose it now, it would be the final nail in the coffin for the Federation. I mentioned how there are 3 levels that I considered to be the peak of Project Wingman, and the first was the attack on the comms facility, the second is Mission 11, and the last is the final level of Project Wingman, Presidia. This level takes everything you learned throughout the game and throws it at you here. It is divided into a 3-stage assault, a aerial assault, a naval assault, and then a ground assault. While it's long, it takes everything you have learned throughout this game and puts it to the test, as you have to fight ships, airships, planes, and ground units. You started this war as just a merc, somebody who either joined for money or glory, but now the war has changed you. It has changed Sicario. It has made them invested in this war, in the outcome of Cascadia. It has made you, the player, invested. I wasn't lying when I said this game makes me feel patriotic for a fictional country. It feels final, and it has this big, grandiose energy to it that is perfectly complemented by the song. Presidia, the song for this level, isn't as high energy and fast paced as something like Showdown. It's big and grandiose, just like the rest of this level. It is the only song, to my knowledge, in the entirety of the OST that has the full Project Wingman leitmotif to it. And when that leitmotif hits, and the writing is on point here. The best voice line, in my opinion, in the whole game is at the very start of this level.
To all mercenaries, do not count days, do not count miles, count only the number of friends you have killed. Go!
It perfectly shows how this war has changed Sicario. So, you put on your A game and you take on the Federation.
Back to the Port Authority building. This is it. The last Federation forces in Cascadia. Kill them all so they may never come back. All units cease engagement immediately.
This is Independence Force HQ, representing the free and civil government of Cascadia. All active units, stand down. I repeat, all units currently engaged, cease fighting immediately.
Posted by the United
Now, some people might feel blue-balled at this. It just ends like that. You have been fighting a war for months now, and it just ends. Some might be annoyed that it just ends here. Some might want to keep pushing on, pummel the Federation to the ground. While some Federation units are annoyed because if this ceasefire was called, 20 minutes earlier, the Federation would have control of Presidia. But nevertheless, you won. With your planes now flying over Presidia, you have control of the city. You've taken back the capital of Cascadia that was lost since the start of the war. This shows your victory. It shows that not only Cascadia, but a group of mercenaries stood up against the world's strongest superpower. God damn it. A lot of people like to compare this last fight with the fight with Pixie from Ace Combat Zero, and while I can see the similarities, I don't actually think they're that similar. The fight with Pixie is a fight with an old friend. Despite being turned an enemy, you still have some level of respect for him. You flew with him for most of the fight, you know his skills. It is not a competition, but more a challenge between two pilots, a dance in the sky to see who is the better pilot. This fight with Crimson is not that. He just nuked a city after a ceasefire was called. Ever since you beat him over Alaska, he has hated you. You damaged his ego, his status as the best pilot, and he's trying to disprove this by any means possible. He has thrown everything about you. He has gone to comic book level villainy to try to kill you, and it didn't even work. The fight starts with him blaming you for the smoldering city underneath. During this fight, he uses numerous rail cannons, missiles, force fields that turn into rail cannons. You're not fighting someone on equal terms here. He had to, and I cannot stress this enough, nuke a city to try and kill you. This second fight with Frost, I mentioned, a fight where she challenges your status as a mercenary. She questions your moralities, she makes you think, and while she's still the bad guy, it kind of puts your head in a spin. This fight isn't really bad. The dialogue isn't bad, don't get me wrong. Crimson One is just a madman. He blames you, he yells at you, says that you're the reason this war continued, you're the reason Presidia is now dead. He isn't some pilot that you have been dancing around in the sky during this whole war. He isn't a man with similar morals to you, but just dedicated to the opposite country. This is a guy who is blinded by his own ego, that he would go to great lengths to prove that he is the best. But you fight over this scorched city for a while, until... changes. You survived his strongest attacks, and now the tables have changed. The music and the tone changes. The health bar changes. Something that usually is only there to indicate a boss battle, usually that being Frost or other peacekeeping squadrons, it now changes. And you're there. The health bars in the game were usually reserved for the boss fights, other peacekeeping squadrons, big planes, or Crimson One. So it means something when you get Hitman's 1's health bar as a boss bar. A small fact about the songs that are used that I absolutely love is the song when you're fighting Crimson 1 is called Kings. The two kings of the sky, Monarch and Crimson 1. But when you get to this final stage, when the music becomes more somber and you see the tables turn, it's called Coronation. Like, I love this. I love little facts like this in video games. This is what I love about video games. This is what I love about Project Wingman. It makes me all giddy like a white girl. But it shows. Everything goes more somber. Your HUD disappears. This is the final battle. You know it. You've won. And you defeat Crimson 1. You shoot him down, and you watch as he flies away, and big boom. Because of course this game has to end with an explosion. But that's how it ends. There's nobody here to cheer your success. Hell, you don't even know if anybody from Sicario survived. Through all his insane ramblings, Crimson 1 was right about one thing. There's nothing left. The planet has been split open. No kingdom to rule over. The whole city that this war was building up to is nothing more but a pile of rubble. It's not a happy ending, just melancholic as you fly over, realizing the real toll of war. So, you get paid your dues, and the game ends. Looking back, I started this project over a year ago, just expecting it to be some simple documentary, another cut and dry war narrative clearing up some of the facts. I would have never expected to discover a story about a group of Mercs appearing basically out of nowhere and taking on the world's greatest superpower. The battles they fought, the sacrifices they made, were among the most incredible stories in history. But nevertheless, this story is coming to a close. Only God knows whether Sicario survived Presidia, or if they died there in the explosion. But with this document, I hope to show the sacrifices they made. How, at the end, they put everything on the line. Some would call it heroic, most would call it incredibly stupid, but yet they kept fighting, knowing that every day they could be one of the embers falling from the sky. How this document is received in areas more under Federation control remains to be seen. But despite that, despite what you think of Cascadia or the Federation, I just hope to preserve the history of Sicario, the history of Hitman Team, the history of Project Wingman.